Hello and welcome to this section. In this section, we will learn the use of function widget. In this section, we will mainly cover the following knowledge points. First, we will talk about the function of function widget and its basic usage. Finally, we will tell you how to use our synchronous function and our asynchronous function. So first of all, we will talk about the function of our function widget. The function widget is located on the right side of our editor, in the same column as our event and our action group. It is specially prepared by HiCode for developers who have code experience or are interested in learning code. It can edit JS code in the HiCode application. It is a widget based on ES6 syntax. The zero-code development mode of HiCode has been used. It can flexibly realize the logic functions of medium and low difficulty required by most development scenarios. On this basis, the use of function widget can expand our implementation of higher-level logic feature and more scenarios of application, so that more developers can join in our HiCode development. Next, we will talk about a basic use of it. The first basic use of it is to do one of our data processing. Generally, logic written with action groups can use our function widget as an equivalent implementation. The code form of the function may be more in line with the development habit of our traditional developers, visually more compact, more convenient for debugging, and the introduced project is also less complex. So generally speaking, in large-scale developing, experienced HiCode developers usually use function widget to implement more complex action group feature, which is generally used for our data processing feature. Here I will make a simple demonstration for you. Similarly, open our editor, create an application name called function, and click Create to Click button, so we create an application. Similarly, we should first add a page under the front end, and then we should add the function widget. The method is very simple. We select its parent, and then select the function in our logic toolbar. We can add such a function widget to our object number, and then we select our function widget in confined that it contains a receive parameter, a return parameter, and our code fragment. This is actually very similar to our action group, right? Contains our receive parameter, return parameter, and a definition of our action group. Therefore, if we want to perform data processing here, we need to ask him to accept our parameters and finally return a parameter. I'll give you a very simple demonstration here. For example, we connect two parameters here, which are called a variable 1 and a variable 2 respectively. Then, finally, we go to a summation, and here we go do a sum, and then here we can perform a series of calculations. We can write a standard here. For example, we first use the first variable to load it. For example, we use a variable of a1, and we introduce a variable such as var1 to you. You can see that because it is a meal, when we write var1, you can see that its receiving parameters are different from ours. The parameter name is the same, so it will have a shadow-like representation. Similarly, we can write another one here. For example, we have another a2, which is equal to our var2. You see, our second parameter has been introduced, and then we have another summation. For example, what is the sum of another in it? It's equal to the value of our a1 plus a value of our a2, and then here we find the sum of it, and finally we return such a qualified one through return. Through such a definition, you can see that we use a1 to receive a parameter of var1, and then we use a2 to receive a parameter of variable 2, and then we assign a value to the core. The result of the assignment is a1 plus a value of a2. Finally, we return the returned result through such a return parameter. Here we call it take a look at an effect. Similarly, we add a button and a text here. If we originally display our results, and then when the button is clicked here, what do? Let's call our such a function, and then here we directly choose an ordinary function to call, because what we just wrote is also an ordinary function, that is, the synchronization function. Later, we will explain to you what is a synchronization function. What is a synchronous function? Then, the parameter value of 1 here is 1 and 2, and the parameter value of 1 here is 2. Let's make a callback. When he finishes this step, we will assign a value to our text. What is the assignment content? The sum in the returned result is the sum of the returned result. Let's read it to see the effect. Then when we click, you see that its final value is equal to 3. Why is it equal to 3? Because you can see that the first value of the input parameter is 1, and the second value of the input parameter is 2. Then, after such a function calculation, it returns a result, and the value is equal to 3. Here I give a very simple example to tell you how to deal with a simple data. Then, generally speaking, our functions have a second function, that is, to operate our DOM. What is DOM manipulation? In fact, let's take a very simple example here, that is, what if we want to manipulate some things that are not in our object number? Then we can use our JS syntax to manipulate the DOM to achieve some of our processing of those widget or elements. Some students want to ask, that is, if I'm already running the editor, and I don't open our browser check mode, how can I delete it? In fact, it can also be deleted. Here, I'll give you a simple demonstration to explain how we operate a DOM. Then, let's directly change the name of the function to remove the unshared tag, and then we can directly manipulate the tag in the code. First of all, since we want to manipulate this tag, what do you think we actually do? The first is not to select such a mark, right? Therefore, in the function, we also need to select such a mark through the syntax this time. Let's write here. Let's start with an image variable. What is it equal to? It equals us document.querySelectorAll. Then, what is the name of such a mark we find here? It's our image. Okay, through this step, he can find our image and assign it to such an image variable, and then we let him delete himself, and then image its zeroth, because at present, we only find a remove. Okay, through such a function, we can directly give it to such a variable deleted, so we add a button on the same side, which is called removing the bit sharing flag, and then change the font size slightly. Then when we click this button, we trigger such a function, and when we click, we call such a function to remove the differential sharing flag, and then we click, and then we take a look, and then click the remove and share tag here. You can also see that it is automatically selected and deleted. Then you can see that there is no differential share tag here. Of course, you don't have to copy my code to help you remove a shared tag. Because in fact, when we select the stage, we have an option called Hide Unbuilt Tips. But you should pay attention to the preview version and the test production version. We can only preview 100 times at most, and then after 100 times, he will not be able to visit normally. Therefore, our preview version and the test version are only for you to try. You don't want to use it for a commercial purpose, otherwise the connection will fail soon. Next, let's talk about synchronous functions and asynchronous functions. First, let's talk about our synchronous functions. All synchronous functions have two very large marks. Remember these two marks, I think it's okay. First, its return flag is re. Second, it can only return once. How do we understand this meaning? Let me give you a simple demonstration. Similarly, we just called this function summation. This is actually a synchronous function. Why? You see, we return through return, right? So let's copy this function first, write a little less, look at these copies, and then paste it under the page. This is our synchronization function, and then we don't want these values here, and then we can leave a sum here. In fact, root cannot. Here, the value of sum is equal to 1, and then click a semicolon to wrap a line. What is returned by a return here? Will you give us a feedback? Let's add a button to call it. Here is our synchronization function. When we click the synchronization function, we call it. When we click, we call such a synchronization function, and then call the function, and then we call back to get a result. We then use the debugging record to see the result. The debugging record is equal to the sum of the returned result, and then let's take a look. When we have a preview, we switch to the console, and then the second synchronization function. When we click it, we can see that there is a pair coming out here, so we get such a value through one of our calls. How can we get it? Here I copied the recording and returned it. But note that the synchronization function also has a feature that it can only be returned once. How can we understand this? Let's try again here. You see, I copy it here, and I paste it again. Next, I copy it again, which is equal to 1 2, and then I let it return again. Let's preview an effect. If I call such a synchronization function, I can see. After it returns equal to 1, does it return equal to 2 again? No, so please note that the synchronization function has a very big feature, that is, it can only be returned once in the whole function. This feature we must remember is called only one return. Next, let's talk about asynchronous functions. For the same asynchronous functions, we can also use a memory method of synchronous functions. First of all, one of its return flags is _func, uppercase C, lowercase b, and then you write a return status in a bracket. You should write a returned value separated by commas, and then note that it can be returned multiple times. If you write the synchronous function to call the asynchronous function, or you write the asynchronous function to call the synchronous function, there is no effect, so we must pay attention to this point. This is a general statement that we call the general good, so this side of the debugging record is equal to the return result of sGood. Let's preview to see the effect. Let's take a look at the synchronization function just now. When I click once, you can see that only one right is printed here. Then when I click the asynchronous inclusive number, you can see that it prints not only 1 but also 2. Why? It is a feature of tax-free, which is that it can be returned multiple times. So under what circumstances will we often use our asynchronous function? Note, generally speaking, we may use such an asynchronous function when calling an external interface. Let me give you an example. For example, we open a document of our applet, and then we can search for a function called getLocation. What do we need for a function that selects a location? What we need is to keep making a selection after opening the map until the user clicks OK, and then make a return. So when we call such a function, we usually use asynchronous functions to make a call. All kinds of WeChat interfaces can be used directly by our function widget. For specific usage methods, we will give another explanation in our WeChat topic. Then we can show you how we actually use such a function to select geographical location in the editor. You can see that it requires us to pass in a meal, including our precision and latitude. Then, if it is successful, let's write the final result we need to get in 3C. It is convenient to put a case function here. If some students want to try it on their own, they can try to look at such a document and write such a case function, and then see whether it is consistent with the result I wrote here. That's all the content of this section. Thank you for watching.